Hi, I'm Faye.
Hi, and I'm Tracy. Welcome to this episode of More Better with Tracey and Faye, the podcast where we help you be a better communicator, one episode at a time. And today, Faye, we are talking about your favorite thing. We're talking about asking questions.
Asking questions, receiving questions, and then
Right.
asking questions about those questions. Is that what we're going to talk about?
That's it. Stick around.
I'm asking questions because I either don't understand something or, well, frankly, more like I don't understand something, or I want to be specific about the information that I need. So we're either asking questions or because we're requesting something, we're requesting information for understanding or to make a decision or to do something. So how do you ask clear questions so that you're kind to your recipient, i.e. the person who has to answer them, can give you what you need? And and if you're being asked or requested of something, how can you in turn clarify what you can give them, right? And sometimes you have to ask questions about the questions you're asking.
Yeah, absolutely. That comes up a lot. And it's interesting to find out how hesitant people can be about asking those questions. And if I look back on my own career, it's a case of confidence.
Yes.
It's a case of if someone says to me, Tracy, I need a report on X, update on this, tell us about, how to communicate better on my team. Nice big general question that can have 1,000 answers. And early in my career, I wouldn't ask those questions for fear of looking like I was dumb or, I'm supposed to be the expert. Therefore, I just take what they give me. They asked the question that they wanted to ask, made the request. So I just need to go fulfill that. And, after a few years, you come to learn that that's actually not helpful, not to me or not to anyone else. That question you asked of your contact, the HR leader, what are your pain points, is a nice, simple question to ask when they say, we need to communicate better on my team. And you're like, I don't know what that means. So where I find success with asking questions and where I have lost any hesitation to ask the question is to focus on what they're trying to achieve. Tracy, we need to communicate better on my team. Well, what's not happening now that you want to have happen?
Okay.
Is it in their written communication? Is it in their interpersonal communication? Is it in the way that they communicate with their clients in the business, if that's what it is, or partners in the business? Or is it the way that they communicate to you, the team leader? And what does that mean? And you get people talking. I think so often people in business are busy. We know that. They're busy. They put the think time into what is most immediate in front of them. So if they call in their comms person and say, Tracy, I need my team to communicate better, and I go, okie doke, and off I go, hit or miss, who knows? But if I take a few minutes and ask those, well, what problem are we trying to solve? Where have you seen this problem showing itself? And you keep digging, then you're almost giving them permission to do that thinking.
Yeah, I love that.
Let's just take a few minutes and let's just think. Let's put everything else aside and let's make this the thing that we're thinking about. And let's have that conversation so we can think this through together. And that 5 or 10 or 20 or however long it goes, that conversation is so valuable because then they know what they want because they've now had the conversation and probably put a lot more thought into it than maybe they did leading up to it. And I know what I can do to help meet their need. And by thinking about it from how can I best meet their need in the most efficient way possible? Well, that's by asking clarifying questions, not because I don't know what I'm doing, but because I want to know better how to meet their need by not wasting time and effort in unnecessary places.
I love that. Like it's what the phrase that came up for me immediately when you were talking about that was, say the quiet part out loud.
Yes.
Right? Because because people are ruminating and thinking about
They
it, that
are.
little hamster in their head, right? And what comes out is that general question, like, give me an update on Q4 sales, right? Okay. Wait, I didn't want those sales. I wanted these sales. Or I wanted to know, um, I want these products. Well, you asked me that before, right? So say that. So maybe, if we're going to talk about questions and being a little more bolder, right, around
Mhm.
asking clarifying questions, say the quiet part out loud, because that I think will help you get what you want, and that is helps you also articulate what's going on in your head.
Mm. And I'd say the key with asking questions is specificity.
Mm-hmm.
Be as very specific as you can in what you are asking, because it's harder to answer a general question than a specific question. If I said, Faye, what what's the biggest pain point on your team when it comes to communication? It's a pretty
Yeah,
general
big
question,
question. Yeah,
right?
they're going to
And,
get a general answer.
and you're going to get a general answer. If I said, Faye, your team has to interact with a lot of other business lines and functions in this organization. When it comes to the communication between the people in your department and, say, the people in finance, is everybody feel satisfied with the way that they're getting their information, sharing the information? Is that where your problem lies? And they might say, no, Tracey, it has nothing to do with finance. It's entirely HR. Okay, great. So, yes. So tell me more. Because sometimes the question is sometimes I'll make a specific question just to get them to say, no, it's not that. Because people so often don't really know what they want or mean until you take them through that conversation. And I don't know this, but I expect if you are in sales, you already know that. That's part of what you do. But in lots of organizations, very few people are salespeople. They're techs, they're analysts, they're operations professionals, they're HR professionals, they're finance professionals. They are not salespeople. So that's not part of the framework of what their learning has been up until now in terms of how to function. But how to function within an organization, but how to have those questions and look at whoever that person is that you're talking to. It's your manager, it's your peer on your team, it's someone from across the business, maybe it's a CEO. If you're not sure, like you said, ask that quiet. If you've got questions rolling in your head, you're like, oh, I'm just going to have to figure this out later. Well, how about you just ask the person right away?
Yeah, yeah. And I know easier said than done, right? I was gonna say, like, don't be scared, right? It is scary, and
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge that. I'm not gonna dive into that too deeply, but I want to acknowledge that it can be a little bit of fear, depending on who you're asking. Maybe you're asking someone who's a specialist or an expert, or maybe there's power dynamics, or you, depending on where you are in your career or or culture of the organization, like you said before, I don't want to look like an idiot. Um, and I don't want to downplay the role of that type of anxiety or fear that people will feel. I feel my piece of advice in that space would be just try it. Like, more you try getting over those fears, the better you'll be.
Mm-hmm. When you're talking about fear of asking questions, I was reminded of the two different experiences I've had in roadshow events. So the leader, typically some senior leader goes and gets in front of groups of employees across different geographies and gives an update on what's happening, talks about what matters, challenges, opportunities, celebrations, and then there's Q&A. And I worked for one organization where people were so reticent to ask the
Yes.
hard questions live at the event But we wanted the hard questions, and the leaders on the stage wanted the hard questions. They wanted to be able to address them. But the culture in that organization made people were just not going to put up their hand. So we developed a system where we had people send in anonymous questions beforehand. And those were the questions that would come up first until the audience felt a little warmed up and felt like they could perhaps ask a difficult question or not. It could be, what keeps you up at night? That question that is about couldn't be more safe. And that's fine. It worked, but it was always a struggle in that organization because there was something about the culture that just didn't allow people to feel safe and comfortable asking hard questions in that really public forum. Then I was at another company, or same thing. And I had said, do you have problems getting questions and how do you handle it if it happens? And they're like, no, it's never a problem. We always have more questions than we have time to answer. And then I witnessed that happening. Tons of hands went up and they were the hard questions. And it was, I never solved the problem. I didn't have any great clarity on, why in the other place it wasn't like that and why, well, I kind of know why in this place that it was. It had to do with who that leader was. But just to tell the point that it can be really difficult to ask questions, and culture will play a lot to it. And if it's a question that you want to ask of someone who you are actually afraid will be annoyed, that's what I used to get. I do a lot of work for senior managers and senior executive people. And if John asked me to do something, well, it's hard getting on John's calendar. And I'm not going to send him a little clarifying, like, I just had this whole idea. They're important. They're more senior than me. I can't possibly go back and ask for clarity because I had my shot. Now they're no longer in front of my face. So I just have to do what I'm asked. And it felt really scary. So I can ask someone else. That's the other thing. If I don't feel comfortable going to John, I could possibly try and find someone else to say, what do you think he meant by that? But which happens. But again, it's not as successful. It's really more, it's better to be prepared to ask those questions as soon as they show up for you.
Yes. I have a comment, though, around the flip side of that. So if you're the one if you're being asked to provide information, data, insight about X, and you're feeling yourself frustrated with the person who's making that, people that are making those requests, my thought is that ask yourself, are you providing a safe space for that person to ask clarifying questions? I've seen a company go from that first example, anonymous only, planted question, because you want to get those hard questions. And you're right, the leaders are starving for those questions. Yeah. But you have to create safe spaces. That's what the anonymity of questions asked in that way does. And then I've seen companies go from that to that other one. They've grown or they've learned, and they now become that company where there's lots of questions up, a lot of hands up, and they're asking the questions that's on they're saying the quiet part out loud. Yeah. Right. But it's a journey. And I think maybe what's happened when I've observed that is that they've realized, hey, sure, we want to create anonymity or they want to create safe spaces. But if they continually make it anonymous, that's a symptom that the space isn't safe. Yeah. That your people are scared.
That there's a culture of fear. Around challenge. Because if you ask the question, I was reminded of something. A part of the reason that people, and I know this from people talking to me, would have been hesitant. They know that the CEO and COO who are on the stage were totally open to hearing any question. And if they ran into them in the hall, they would totally ask those questions because that's the nature of who these individuals were. They were open to that. But their manager wasn't.
Yeah, there you go.
So if I asked that question, my manager would get mad at me because they would think that my asking that question was a bad reflection on them.
There you go. Status. You've compromised in their mind. You've compromised their status in front of their leader and their peers. It's an interesting conversation because it's not just about asking clarifying questions, not all on you. Like, we don't have to put all on the person who's asking for that information. We should also look inside and say, are we creating the conditions for us to share information, to be more collaborative, to be more creative, to be more innovative? Those are the conditions, right? So are we creating the conditions that enable that to happen? And if we're not, if we're constantly frustrated that Bob in accounting is asking for this again, like, oh, Tracy's always asking for, about for this data, and I gave her a file that was like 76-page Excel document.
That's all she needed.
Right? That's all she needed.
Why
Like,
she
I
keep
don't know
bugging
what's
me?
wrong with her, right? Like, why?
Yeah.
And she every quarter she's asking me, and now her boss is asking me, and blah blah blah, right? But so I don't know. I think that there's something there around. We have to create the conditions for those clarifying questions on both sides to occur.
Yeah, because it's a recognition that everybody wins if this happens.
It clear as kind.
So to recap around this idea of asking good questions in the course of doing your work, whatever your work is, you got to work with other people. You need to have conversations. If you're too general in your requests, if you don't ask those clarifying questions, we know it wastes time, it wastes effort, it wastes energy. So when it comes to asking questions, these are my final thoughts, Faye, and then I'll pass it over to you, is you want to ask those questions. If it's in your head, you need to ask it out loud. As Faye says, say the quiet part out loud. Be as specific as you can in the questions that you're asking, because being general in your question will get you something general in your answer, and that is not likely where you need to end up in terms of your understanding of what's happening in this. Your thoughts?
I'm gonna lean on the environment. Create the environment. If you're feeling that you're frustrated because either someone keeps asking you for something that you're not sure of, create the conditions for them to ask better or clarifying questions, and also create the space for you to also like ask them what they're, and don't be afraid to be bold, be more direct, and be clearer about what they might need. Don't be afraid to ask for what you want. And practice. I recognize the role of fear, anxiety in these spaces, but it's okay.
And I think the language that you can use in that isn't, I'm not sure I understand, can you please clarify? Because that is very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Turn that around and say, I want to be able to deliver for you exactly what you need. So can you just tell me specifically how are you going to be using this information?
Exactly.
And make it about meeting their need, not about your lack of knowledge or clarity.
Nice. All right. And with that, I'm Faye.
And I'm Tracy. Join us next time on More Better with Tracey and Faye.